Now,
on News Talk 105.9 WMAL.
Vince Coglianese.
Good afternoon to you. 5:06 now, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up, Dr. E.J. Antoni, the economist from the Heritage Foundation, and, of course, the in-house economist for the Vince Coglianese Show. He'll join us at 5:30. We'll talk about the latest economic data and also this big spending fight going on at the Capitol. A programming note for you. You may have noticed Congressman Andy Biggs did not join us in the last half hour. We are going to have him back on soon. It's always busy for these members of Congress. We try and get them when we can. You can join us today at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Let's move now to a conversation with our friend Mike Van Meter. He is a candidate for Virginia State Senate in the 33rd District, which includes parts of Prince William County and Fairfax County. And he is also a Navy veteran and a law enforcement veteran, a guy who worked at the FBI. He's done it all. Mike, great to have you with us, sir.
Hey, Vince. How are you? Thanks for having me back on.
I'm doing so well. Tell me how your candidacy is going. The state Senate, such an important body for Republicans to get control of. Can it happen?
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to happen, Vince, and I'll tell you why. And I was grateful the governor came out last night. We were at a fundraiser in McLean, and he talked about how the Senate is a priority, and we are going to take this majority, and we're going to get all of our ideas, these conservative ideas, these ideas that are great for the Commonwealth of Virginia. We're going to get his agenda through, and we're going to do this. And Vince, we're going to stop this nonsense that's happening with the Democrats, and we're going to stop what they have inflicted upon the people in Virginia, particularly in our schools. And we're going to do it, Vince. I really believe that in my heart.
Yeah, it seems if you could name priority one for a Republican-controlled Senate in Virginia, what would it be? I've heard a lot of conversation about taking us off of the California fuel standards. We have these like ridiculous standards where Virginia has to essentially destroy the internal combustion engine because California told us to. What's priority one, you think?
Well, that was actually brought up last night, and I don't know about you, but I don't want California dictating anything, let alone anything here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. But there's a lot of issues, obviously, that need to be covered, and we can talk about. That's an important one, but I will tell you the biggie. I was actually out at a mosque this afternoon, and I've been to a number of mosques and other places of worship and faith. The big issue right now is what's happening in our schools. And that first and foremost needs to be stopped. We need to, Virginia used to be very, very high, highly rated nationally when it came to education. And we've really dropped off. And the governor last night actually talked about tutoring programs and getting our children back to where they need to be and catching up from what the damage that was done during COVID. And we know that was inflicted on us by the Democrats. But we need to really get this indoctrination, this idea that we're going to separate parents from their children. We have to get that out. And that's what everybody's asking me about, Vince. Everybody's asking me about that.
How pervasive is it, do you think, the problem?
Oh, it's totally pervasive. This idea that you have a child, your child goes to school, Vince, and your child is struggling with issues of identity. Sometimes these ideas of identity are implanted in the child, and then they are going to struggle with that, and that this would be kept away from you as a parent. Think about that. The Democrats want to separate you from your child, and you are not going to be informed on what's going on with your child. Maybe your child has some serious underlying mental health issues. We know that the suicide rate with people that struggle with this issue is much higher. The addiction rate is much higher. And you wouldn't be informed about that as a parent. I work in a hospital now, Vince, and we would never keep that information. In no other situation would you keep that information from a parent. But they're doing it in our schools.
It's amazing.
It is amazing.
It's just like where has our country gone? And it's not unique to Virginia, but it's definitely happening in Virginia. In fact, so much of the bizarre relationship now between educators and parents, the nation's attention was certainly made aware of it in places like Loudoun County, and it's such a sad thing where you have schools both indoctrinating children, encouraging them to keep secrets from their parents about that. And then even, allowing kids to be abused without doing anything about it inside of some of these schools. That Loudoun County is an example of that. It happened in Fairfax County. It's happening too much all over the place.
That's exactly right. And I've had some of my liberal friends come up to me and say, Mike, the problem is going to be that if a child, let's say that this child comes from a family that maybe is not accepting of this, and you're exposing them to abuse. And the way I challenge them on that is, I'm a mandated reporter, and the work that I do now is a therapist. And if I suspect that someone is being abused, a child is being abused at home, there are systems, Vince, in place to deal with that. We've always had these systems. You have CPS referrals, we have police referrals, and we do those things as mandated reporters. Now, what happens in a school is if the same thing happened, if a teacher genuinely believes that a child is being abused at home or could be abused, then they are to mandate that. They're mandated to report that, rather. That's not going to change, and I think that they convolute that issue. But what we have now is that the schools are actually abusing the child because they may possibly be neglecting this child from the help that they need, and that's what we want. And that's up to the parent to do.
Okay, but on this transgender issue thing, though, a parent telling their child that their body is not a mistake is not abuse.
Right.
That is not. That doesn't amount to abuse. I dare a
That's
teacher
exactly right.
to report that. If a mother tells her son, "You're my boy. You're not a girl. You're my boy," that's not abuse. But we live in this lunatic world now where it's cast as that.
That's exactly right. And that's where the separation comes into play. And that's why and some of the people that I've spoken to are teachers. And I asked them, is it not correct that if you genuinely believe that child is being abused at home, are you not mandated to report that? And the answer, of course, is yes. And I said, then why don't you report these issues? Because it goes back to what you just said, because it's not abuse and they know it. And you and I both know it and they know it. This is just a way that they can separate. But you know what, Vince? This is Marxism, and this is where we are. We are going down that road. And when I talk to people that have immigrated here, and new immigrants who, by the way, are just some of the most patriotic people I've ever met, they ask me all the time. They say, Mike, what the heck is going on? We left these countries where we were oppressed, and we come here, and the same thing is happening. Why are you allowing this to happen? And Vince, what I tell them is, I'm not allowing that to happen. That's why I need your vote, because my opponent actually is leading the charge of this. By the way, my opponent led the charge to defund the police, destroy cities, and really has led to the increase in crime and fentanyl and all of the other issues that we're facing now. If you want that, vote for her, for goodness sake. So if that's what you want. But I haven't met anybody that wants that yet.
His opponent in this case, we're talking to Mike Van Meter. He's running in the State Senate District 33. His opponent, Jennifer Carroll Foy, former member of the State Assembly, and a crazy person. Would you agree?
Well,
are you allowed to say that?
I'm not qualified to say that, but I will say I won't say she's a crazy person. She has crazy ideas. How about that? She has crazy ideas, and they're destructive ideas. Her policies, and listen, and if you're out there listening right now, let me be very clear. Every problem that we are facing in the Commonwealth of Virginia today, she led the charge on. Okay, and I would never, ever, ever go to the person that created these problems. I would not go to them to look for the solution. Absolutely not. And she thinks that everybody's a racist. The Commonwealth is racist. Everybody down in Richmond was she's a graduate of VMI. She thinks all of them are racist. Me having been a white law enforcement official, of course, I'm a racist. And this is it's crazy talk. And I think we're done with that. I think after 3 years, the last 3 years, we've seen where we are in this state. And every police department that I talk to cannot recruit. They can't get quality people. Crime rates, particularly violent crime rates, have gone up. We have fentanyl. The number one cause of death of people between the ages of 18 and 39 is fentanyl. And the numbers go up every single month. Vince, there's not 1 month where the numbers go down. Okay. And with my background as a drug and alcohol counselor, former law enforcement officer, an FBI agent, and a police officer, and a Navy pilot, Vince, I'm uniquely qualified to deal with. There's no one in the state house that has my background. No one.
Right.
This is the right time, and we need every single person to vote. Bring everybody out to vote.
Let's talk about solutions to crime then, because I really am interested in your opinions on that. What can the state legislature do here? What could you do as a Virginia state senator to help alleviate some of the rising crime? We're seeing it all over the country. It's happening in Virginia. And part of the problem is definitely some of these Soros-funded prosecutors, no question, in the Commonwealth attorney's offices who are aiding and abetting criminals. What can the state Senate do?
Oh, a lot. Well, let's just kind of break that down here a little bit. First of all, the police officers, for those of you that aren't familiar with law enforcement, we arrest somebody, but then they have to be prosecuted. So the police department, sheriff's offices work with the Commonwealth attorney. In my case, the guy that's running in my district that we need is, we need to get our Commonwealth attorney, Matt Lowry. We need to get him in there because he's going to be a tough prosecutor. So it doesn't do us any good to arrest somebody and then have them released. So one, we need to be tough. We need to enforce laws and we need to prosecute people. But when it comes to the state legislature, first and foremost, we need to recruit the best and the brightest. And I'm on a mission, Vince, to get the best and the brightest into this honorable profession, which is law enforcement. We're going to get them in. I'm going to be on a mission to do that. Then they need to be the best trained. They need to be the best equipped. And actually, I had 7 years where I taught at the FBI Academy, and I'm uniquely suited to look at these programs. And I'm going to encourage the legislature to provide funding, the people and the resources to train our first responders, particularly the police and sheriff's deputies in Virginia, to be the best in the nation. And we are going to restore pride into this honor. Vince, I've spent most of my adult life in law enforcement. It is an honorable profession. These people are doing the Lord's work. We have to protect them. We have to train them. And we have the people in place that can do it. And this lady that I'm running against led the charge to destroy this honorable profession. And all of us, particularly people of color, have paid a dear price for it. We're done with it. We're done with it.
Amen. I really hope you win this race. And how can people get a hold of you? You have a website, right, sir?
I do. VanMeterForVirginia.com, and that's VanMeter with ER at the end, Virginia.com. Please get out and vote. It's open now. Early voting has started because, as you know, it's 45 days of voting. Goodness gracious, 45 days of voting. And the governor also would like everybody to look at SecureYourVoteVirginia.com. SecureYourVoteVirginia.com. Everybody, get out there. Bring everybody you know. Make them come out and vote.
Are you seeing, Mike, are you seeing signs that people are actually doing the early voting, showing up and filling out those ballots?
Yeah, they are. My understanding is that in Prince William, remember I have parts of Fairfax and Prince William.
Yeah.
My understanding was that the first day of voting in Prince William was like up 74%. I believe that was what the number was compared to the last election. So people are turning out, and it's a steady stream. It's a steady stream of people. They're not lined up. But I think people are interested. But folks. But remember, you get the government that you voted for, right? On November 8th, do not come up to me and complain about what you have in the 33rd district of in Virginia. Listen, you could not be more of a diametric opposite between me and Jennifer Foy. We're diametric opposites. And if you want her, for goodness sake, vote for her. But I really don't think that you want that. We're tired of this, Vince. We are. Let's take the state back.
All right. Mike Van Meter running in the 33rd District in Virginia. Best of luck to you, sir, on I think it's an important mission. Good to talk to you today.
All right. Thank you, my friend. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Always. It's 5:20 now.
Monday on the Chris Plant Show, ABC News is traumatized that any government shutdown could affect attendance at Fat Bear Week. 9 a.m. on WMAL.
A jury today, speaking of Virginia, found former Loudoun County Superintendent Scott Ziegler guilty in a crime stemming from the cover-up of a gender-confused rapist. It's crazy what I'm reading here. This is the Daily Wire. Luke Rosiak has the coverage today. Dateline, Loudoun County, Virginia. A jury of 6 women and 1 man on Friday found ex-Loudoun County Public School Superintendent Scott Ziegler guilty of using his position to retaliate against a teacher for cooperating with a grand jury investigating how the district handled sexual assault. The quick trial was a 4-day trial plus a day of deliberations. The jury found that Ziegler wrongfully fired a teacher who who had disclosed to Virginia investigators the mishandling of sexual assault in her classroom. Ziegler was convicted of using his official position to retaliate against someone for exercising their rights and acquitted of punishing someone for testifying to a jury. So there were 2 counts. He was acquitted on 1, but he was found guilty of retaliating against her for exercising her rights. It was a misdemeanor. Ziegler could face up to 12 months in jail, a $2,500 fine, or both. Sentencing in the trial is set to occur in January, according to the judge, Douglas Fleming Jr. Ziegler's victim, former special education teacher Erin Brooks, clasped her hands in front of her mouth in emotion after the verdict was read. Prosecutors appointed by Attorney General Jason Miyares, the Republican, said that after they began investigating the school district's cover-up of a bathroom rape, they spoke with Brooks, who disclosed an unrelated instance of mishandling of sexual assault by school administrators. The administrators mishandled a sexual assault claim. Brooks was then fired by Ziegler for cooperating with the special grand jury. Out of all of LCPS's 15,000 teachers, Brooks was singled out for firing by Ziegler at a school board meeting in June of 2022, said prosecutors. Ziegler told board members he fired Brooks for giving private information to a conservative activist and for giving private information to the grand jury. School board member John Beatty testified. Ziegler's alleged claim that Brooks had given information to a conservative activist turned out to be false, and it would be illegal to punish her for telling the truth to a jury that she'd been subpoenaed by, prosecutors argued. At the trial, school board member Brenda Sheridan, a Democrat who was chair during the gender-fluid rape cover-up, was asked under oath about Ziegler's closed-door statements that amounted to a confession. She didn't deny Beatty's version. Instead, she refused to answer, saying that because Division Attorney Robert Falcone was in the room during the discussion, she believed she could invoke attorney-client privilege. Everything's a cover-up with these people. Everything. Every step of the way. Can't talk about that. Attorney-client privilege. The public doesn't get to know. Keep the parents out of it. Don't tell them about the sexual assault in the bathrooms. Fire the woman who embarrasses us by exposing our sins in public. Somebody faced consequences today. Scott Ziegler found guilty in Loudoun County. It's 529.
News Talk 105.9 WMAL.
Making sense of the news.
Good afternoon to you. 535 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. You can join us today, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Always happy for your contributions. We're looking at inflation going up yet again. Surprise, surprise, meaning the price of everything still going up. Although the New York Times tried to dress it up today. They say inflation measure favored by the Fed cooled in August. Federal Reserve officials received more good news in their battle against rapid inflation on Friday when a key inflation measure continued to slow. By the way, this is all government math. Inflation keeps going up. There's no deflation. The things are not getting cheaper. They're talking about things are getting more expensive at a slower rate. It's the latest evidence that a return to normal after the pandemic and higher interest rates are combining to wrestle rapid price increases back to a more normal pace. Sure. All right, let's find out what's really going on with the guy who actually knows. EJ Antoni is a research fellow at the Heritage Foundation and an in-house economist, of course, for this show. EJ, great to talk to you today, sir.
Vince, thank you for having me back.
Okay, so the New York Times, I love this. I love when people say inflation is going down. When they say inflation is going down, that doesn't actually mean inflation is going down, does it?
Very often, no. And what it certainly doesn't mean is that prices are going down, as you were just saying. You know, it's just a matter of you're getting poorer at a slower rate. And even still, the Fed's preferred inflation gauge, although it did come down, which that's great news. But guess what? It's still about twice the Fed's target. And so by no means are we out of the woods here. The other thing that's really troubling is people are ignoring the fact that the headline inflation number from today's report went up. They tend to ignore that one because it includes food and energy, which are highly volatile. And I understand the reasoning behind that. But the problem is that the upward price pressures that we're seeing right now have no sign of being volatile.
Sure.
Instead, it looks like the new normal.
And that makes total sense because, whoever spends money on food or energy, those are not a big part of my budget.
Oh, no, not at all. But, I mean, again, I understand the methodology that when these things are very volatile, you don't want to look at that on a monthly basis and see prices going way up or way down and try to base your fiscal and monetary policy on that. I totally understand that. But the oil price paradigm is really shifting here, where you have the Biden administration reducing domestic supply and you have foreign actors reducing international supply. There's no chance of oil going back down here. It's going to continue to march up.
It really is. Our government is in a debt crunch, as you know all too well. We have over $33 trillion in debt now. I've been citing the numbers that I believe the debt service payment is what, a fifth of all government expenditures right now?
Yes, and unfortunately, it's going to get a lot worse really fast. In the next fiscal year, we're probably going to have about $1.5 trillion in interest payments to service the debt. If you look at where yields are right now, I forget if they go even higher, but just look at where they are right now. Everything from very short-term yields to the longest term, the 30-year Treasury bond, and everything in between, they have gone up, anywhere from 400 to 500 basis points in some cases, compared to where they were just a little while ago.
So when the Fed is, as the New York Times says, is trying to wrestle inflation down, in order to do that, they have to keep raising their interest rates. That means that the interest rate on our debt is skyrocketing, correct?
Absolutely. And, unfortunately, this is the consequence of the sugar rush. You get a crash later. What the Fed essentially did was basically borrow all of this value from the future and bring it forward to today. Well, guess what? The bill is coming due, and it's big. It's trillions and trillions of dollars worth that needs to be paid up. It's going to be paid for through the hidden tax of inflation and through a recession.
So, yeah, okay, so take me through that. I'd like people to understand, I would like to understand what the negative consequences of all of this are. So the interest rates are being driven up. The idea is to try and bring prices back down. That's why they're doing that. One of the ways they do that is by putting people on the unemployment line. They figure if they could get more workers out of the workforce, that's what the Fed honestly wants to do this. If they get more workers out of the workforce, fewer people will have money to spend, and then prices will come down. What other things might happen here?
Well, what the Fed essentially did was create trillions of dollars for the government to spend, and then the logical thing to do, if you want to get rid of the inflation that caused, would just be to claw that money back from the government. But instead, they're trying to have their cake and eat it too, which means transferring money away from the private sector and towards the government. In other words, still provide the government with all the money that Congress wants to spend, but they're starving the private market for capital in the process. And Treasury is literally borrowing so much that they are outstripping the Fed's ability to control interest rates and to maneuver money away from the private sector and to the Treasury's coffers. And so the result of that is not only higher interest rates in the private market, which we've already seen with mortgage rates going through the roof, credit card rates hitting an all-time high, but now you're absolutely right that you're seeing interest rates on Treasury debt also go through the roof, which is pushing interest on the debt upwards at the same rate.
Does it worry you that that bankruptcies are on the rise? For the first time in 13 years, bankruptcy cases are up 18% year over year. They had reached lows in 21 and 22, but now they're going up pretty dramatically, EJ.
Exactly, and I'm so glad you brought this up, Vince. A lot of people are ignoring this because the level is still very low, and even not just the level, but the percent of bankruptcies is still very low. The problem is that the rate at which it is rising is incredibly high. And what happened during the pandemic, you had moratoriums on rent, on mortgage payments, student loan payments. I mean, for crying out loud, the student loan payment moratorium is just coming to an end now. And so you had consumers flush with cash, and they actually started to pay down their credit cards initially. But now under the Biden administration, they've been doing the opposite, racking up credit card debt. Students have, instead of paying down their student loans, they've been taking that money and simply spending it. And as a result, you now have a giant stockpile of consumer debt, far more than we had before, and people can't pay it off. And that means not only do you have personal bankruptcies, but as personal spending declines, business revenue also declines, and that's where you're getting the business bankruptcies from as well. I mean, things are really going south in a hurry. I wish I had better news here, but it's just not a good position right now for the economy.
Well, the reason I like talking to you, and one of the many reasons, is because you're bringing some reality to this conversation that the White House isn't. So what we hear on almost daily basis from the White House is that this is Bidenomics that we're all experiencing. It's wonderful. The American public doesn't realize how wonderful it is. It's unfortunate that they're not recognizing all of the positive signs in the economy. The White House likes to point to the unemployment number and say, look, unemployment is low historically, and you should be grateful to us. We've created all of these jobs. That's the sign of a strong economy. And when we talk to you, EJ, you kind of break through these, well, as we know, ridiculous talking points.
Well, the first thing you said there, that we're all experiencing Bidenomics, that is true, and the rest of it is a lie. Take the unemployment rate, for example. You know, if you actually factor in all of the people who have left the workforce, I mean, for example, there are millions of people missing from the workforce right now because the disability rolls exploded, and so they're excluded from that unemployment rate calculation. Throw all those people in. In other words, look at the pre-pandemic trend and compare those numbers for today, whether it's the employment to population ratio, the labor force participation rate, et cetera, et cetera. What you find is that the real unemployment rate is actually north of 6%, not 3% and change. So the idea that somehow everything is just going swimmingly, I mean, it's just absolute nonsense.
And in those employment numbers, can you drill down for me for a moment? You and I have talked about this before, but a lot of Americans are taking multiple jobs now, which is giving us the illusion that unemployment is low. Is that right?
Exactly. So every single time that someone takes a second or a third job, you get counted again in those payroll statistics. And that's the monthly jobs number that we get, whether it's, the economy added 200,000 jobs, 180,000 jobs, whatever the case may be. So, yes, you're absolutely right that multiple job holders are going to goose those numbers. But also, as small businesses have been collapsing and people transition away from unincorporated self-employment, where you're not included in those surveys, and you, let's say, go work for a big corporation after that, you go from not being counted to being counted. In other words, you haven't actually increased the number of people working, but you've increased the number of payrolls in the country.
Right. Okay. And then another piece that I always wonder about is foreigners versus native-born Americans. What are the employment trends among those two categories?
Well, one quick thing I have to say on this: a lot of people made hay in the last report that the number of native-born American workers went down so dramatically. But guess what? They're not seasonally adjusted, so that tends to happen. In the month of August, you get a boom in July, you get another boom at the end of the year, but there are other months like August, like January, where you see those numbers drop off a cliff. So don't pay attention to the monthly number, pay attention to the yearly change, because then you don't have to worry about a seasonal adjustment. You're comparing the same month from one year to another. But even when you do that, what you find is that since the pandemic, a disproportionate number of jobs have actually gone to foreign-born individuals. In fact, if you compare the level of employment today for native-born and foreign-born people, what you find is virtually all of the jobs above pre-pandemic level have gone to foreign-born workers. So the native-born workers are roughly back to where they were in February of 2020, but any additional jobs we have above that has gone entirely to the foreign-born.
So when we look at Biden's record on this subject, he hasn't actually created jobs for Americans. In fact, by the numbers you just gave me, he hasn't created any jobs for Americans. He's only created a small number of jobs for foreigners.
Right, but I mean, that kind of fits with the trend. Let's be honest here. If we do a rational assessment, I mean, Biden is essentially the America last president, whether we're talking about jobs, whether we're talking about energy, you name it. It is not about America first, like it was under President Trump or his predecessor way back, Warren Harding, who coined the phrase. With Joe Biden, it is about the global economy. It is about the global agenda.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about this budget fight that's going on in Congress then, because everything you just said, to me, justifies Washington getting serious about our out-of-control spending problem, one that the American people are going to have to bear the brunt of, already are. bearing the brunt of. What do you think of this current spending fight? A bunch of Republicans did stop a spending bill from advancing today, a stopgap spending bill. Washington is furious about this, that they would do this. But then again, Democrats didn't vote to keep the government open. They didn't support the stopgap spending bill either. So what do you make of it?
Well, let me just say I feel very bad actually for the politicians because none of them knew that the fiscal year was ending at the end of this month. It just kind of jumped up on everyone out of the blue.
Mm-hmm.
You give me a break. The problem here is that we continuously let things go down to the wire because it's a tactic of those who want to spend the taxpayers' money and then some. They purposely let these things go down to the wire. They create a crisis, and then they have the audacity to use government workers and government contractors as human shields to basically say we're going to inflict as much pain as necessary on those people until we get our way, until we're allowed to spend as much of the taxpayer money as we want. And
right.
then some. I'm sorry, but enough is enough.
Right. Yeah. So they got all these government workers and they're holding them hostage now and saying if they suffer pain, it's your fault for not signing on to a pork-filled bill full of nonsense that the American people have no time to actually review and consider.
Right. And you know what, Vince, it is long past time we get back to regular order and we fund the government in a normal way where we go item by item, budget by budget. No more omnibuses where no one has time to read it, where the people have no idea what's in it, and we only find out years later that the special interests have gotten rich at the expense of the rest of us. It is long past time that we pass the 12 normal appropriations bills.
A uniquely offensive feature of this particular round of government spending is that should the government actually be put in timeout this weekend, the Ukrainian government's going to be fully funded. The American taxpayer is going to continue to have to pay for the cost of that war throughout the entirety of the so-called government shutdown. Meanwhile, you'll have various categories of federal workers who are going to be furloughed and federal contractors not paid as a result of this. And members of Congress in Ukraine, they're going to be fine. Their paychecks are going to keep coming.
Oh, absolutely. But, aside from a handful of lawmakers here in the United States who have voluntarily said, please don't pay me to the Congress, the rest of them are still getting paid. So, I find it not the littlest bit hypocritical that so many of these politicians are going to get paid while they righteously complain about how many other government workers are not getting paid. If you really feel so bad about it, how about you don't get paid either? Okay, show a little solidarity.
Yeah, I mean, heck, Trump donated his whole paycheck every year. Everyone's like, Trump didn't pay that much in taxes. What are you talking about? He paid 100% of his income every quarter. He paid in taxes. So much gratitude to you as always, EJ Antoni. Thank you very much. Nice to talk to you. Please have a great weekend, sir.
You do the same.
It's 5:50 now.
Mark Levin, weeknights from 6 till 9.
On News Talk 105.9 WMAL.
Making sense of the news.
The lunatic chairman of the Joint Chiefs, thoroughly modern Mark Milley, had his retirement ceremony today. And up until his very last moment, he is a hair-on-fire political lunatic. Remember, this is the same guy who once promised China he would alert them if the United States was ever about to wage an attack on China. I'll give you a call. I'll give you a heads up, he said. Here he is today.
You see, we in uniform are unique. We are unique among the world's armies. We are unique among the world's militaries. We don't take an oath to a country. We don't take an oath to a tribe. We don't take an oath to a religion. We don't take an oath to a king or a queen.
To a country? He just said we don't take an oath to a country. You take an oath to the Constitution to defend this country.
Or a dictator. And we don't take an oath to a wannabe dictator.
You hear that?
We don't take an oath to an individual. We take an oath to the Constitution.
Listen to this guy. We don't take an oath to a wannabe dictator, he says. Now, this is supposed to be a not-so-subtle shot at Donald Trump because he's a wannabe dictator. That's what thoroughly modern Mark Milley has to say about him. What kind of military man is this? That is passive aggression. That's not outright aggression. You want to say it? Go ahead, say it, big man. Say it. Say Donald Trump. We don't take an oath to Donald Trump. But no, even in his final moments, ridiculous, political, feline, passive aggression from the outgoing chairman of the Joint Chiefs, the man who promised to call China should we ever attack them. Good riddance, we say. Good riddance. Time to go. You know what it's time for also? The great one, Mark Levin. He's up next here on the legendary WMAL.
News Talk 105.9 WMAL.
Making sense of the news.